Now, what you'll notice here is some of these backups have Butch Vig vocal on it. This is like a good secret sauce for me. I love the Butch Vig vocal effect. Like all sorts of stuff in that Butch Vig plugin or clutch. There's just really quick ways to get to like telephone, to get to distorted vocals, to get to really quick ways. And you could do it other ways, but it's just there's a lot in this plugin. So I find use for it all the time. And it's a fairly old plugin, but damn, it's good. So it still shows up on my mix all the time. Where do I put the auto-tune? You know, I'll generally run auto-tune first, but in this case, it's not first. And that's probably just because I threw the SSL 4KB up because I didn't think the song was going to need auto-tune, and then it did. So instead of moving all the things and switching it, I just put it after. So if you want to know if that matters or not, if you have EQ and then the auto-tune, generally I'll run auto-tune first because the way I look at it is I want the stuff tuned at the first step and then I'll do everything else. But because of my templates a lot and the way I roll, I'll throw EQ, the 4KB on everything. And when that happens, moving it can be a pain. It's easier to put it on than take it off the way it works. So that's how I look at that. That's why that's there. In that position. So when you brighten high end, the S's come up too. So just be mindful of that. That means, in my opinion, that if you're using somebody's mic that was dark and you wind up boosting a lot of 8K, be mindful you're going to need to de-ess, you know, and you can de-ess more than once. It's, you know, it's okay. So if you have to do that, it's okay. But when you de-ess, let me show you what I got going. In my opinion, stick wide band. Because wideband is just a more natural sounding de-ess, especially if you're going to do 2 times. One of them's got to be like a wideband, so it's just more natural. And don't, wherever you think it's good, where now you're killing the S's, because you're focused on it, it's probably too good. So back it off a little bit from that point. That's a good tip. And that's the same thing with automation. When you're automating stuff, make sure the volume is low. If you don't like the way your vocals sound in the mix, a big reason to me is that you're probably mixing too loud. Make your mix low enough where if there was somebody in the room talking to each other, and they could be whispering, talking down here like, hey, blah, blah, that would upset you. If it doesn't upset you, if you can't picture somebody talking and you hearing it, you're mixing too loud. You got to mix low. Especially when you're mixing like vocals, that's the time to mix low. I'll turn it up for things like bass because, you know, in my setup, my speakers, I hear bass better when it's loud. But I'll put on headphones too if I need to hear more detail on bass. And I'm not going to crank it like crazy. But it's very hard to hear bass when it's quiet, like all the bass, the low end specifically, the sub frequencies and things like that. And I rock a sub. But the point is, it can be harder to hear the low end. So that's when I'm turning up to hear that. When I'm doing vocals, I am lowering everything so that I can automate and ride that vocal and it sounds good low. That's the key. The biggest key to making the vocals the right volume is mix low. Because as you're automating, if you make it too loud, it will stick out if it's low. Whereas if you're listening loud, you won't ever know if it's too loud. That's just the truth, guys. And yes, it's uncomfortable. People are going to be like, I can't mix low. It's yada, yada. That's the point. Because it's harder to mix that way, do it. You'll get better. You'll actually get better. And then by doing that, your mixes will improve. Because all of a sudden, you'll get more comfortable working that way. It wasn't easy at first when I did it either. But after all this time, I wouldn't trade it for anything because that's how I get my best mixes. Always is mixing low. And I'm not talking about mixing so low you can't hear it. I'm just talking about like a normal listening volume where if people were talking, they would get in your way. That's how you got to think about it. All right. And everybody has a different threshold of like what the right volume is. So for you, maybe it's a little louder than for some other people. You know, it all depends on what you can hear. If you can hear when it's low, then you are at a huge advantage because you won't get ear fatigue. You will be able to mix more songs longer. You won't damage your hearing. There's like benefit upon benefit upon benefit. Whereas mixing loud, there's not that many benefits. Rely on volume automation to make every word heard clearly and to bring out the nuances. And a great trick from Mark Daniel Nelson, basically ends of phrases. That was the first time I ever heard anyone point out that specifically, but it made so much sense that it's like the ends of the phrases are the ones that usually get quieter, but that's where the personality of the singer lies. It's in the end of the phrase, even more so than the beginning. Michael Beinhorn talks about this. Chris Cornell's voice is so cool at the end of his phrases, you know? It's like when he ends the word, you hear like you hear this like cool thing that he does that ends his phrases that's just visceral. And without that, it wouldn't sound as good. So you got to do some automation, especially on the quieter ends of phrases. And that's what the way I look at automation is when a guy comes into the mic hot, that's not where I'm automating. And I'm using touch automation so the level lives right when it sounds great, and then when he gets quiet, I'm touching it up, and then as soon as that part, I just let go, and it goes back to where it's supposed to be. That's the beauty of touch automation. All right, you stop touching it, it goes back to where you had it.